Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
We live in interesting times where the tech giants are taking and censoring people like the My Pillow person and stealing everybody's information as much as they can and spying on everyone they can. And now they're turning on each other.
You know, when I heard the news about the My Pillow person, it took me quite a while to remember the commercial that actually was pertinent to his existence.
Well, he's been knocked off of Snapchat. He was knocked off of Facebook. He was knocked off of Twitter. His friends opened up accounts and quoted him and were instantly removed. His videos have been pulled down from YouTube.
What sort of heinous crime did he commit?
He supported Trump. And he has the nerve to take and keep pointing out the evidences of the corruption in the last election.
So
now I grant you, go on.
Oh. Did you see the Times article where they said they openly admitted that there's a shadow cabal, but instead of trying to manipulate the election, they were trying to fortify it. Yeah. That's what they said.
Fortify it.
Yeah.
By cheating.
Yeah.
Now they're fixing the election. He's from what I've been told in the conspiracy field, he's claiming to have all this evidence of millions of fraudulent votes from dead people voting, from people who are underage voting, and from foreign votes. And it may all be true. But being they refused to investigate the election and they won't hand over the voting machines, I don't see how you could prove any of it.
Yeah.
Yes, we know that internet traffic spiked during certain time periods during the vote count, and it was between the cities with the corrupt vote counts and foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas that, how do you prove that was actually to the voting machines?
Well, without investigating it, you can't. It just looks suspicious, which is what you're supposed to use as your basis for investigating. You don't really know the truth until you've investigated. But they refuse to investigate.
And they won't investigate because there is no proof. And there is no proof because they haven't investigated.
Yeah.
It's one of these huge circular...
It's an Ouroboros, if you will.
But yeah, that's the thing with the My Pillow guy.
Mm-hmm.
But the QAnon people still believe that he's going to come out and give this information because of his Trump ties, and give it and hand it over to the powers to be, and all these the corruption will come out, and Biden will be removed from office, and Trump will be placed in his place, and the criminals will all go to jail.
They are far too optimistic.
And I wonder what kind of fairy world they live in.
They clearly don't understand the basics of corruption.
Well, I was explaining to an individual today that even if you could prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and the people came out and confessed it, they could shout it from the Senate and congressional floor that they stole the election. And it still wouldn't change anything because the Congress made Biden president.
Mm-hmm.
And under the Constitution, that makes him president. The only way would be to impeach him. And you
Now,
know they're not going to do that because they'd have to impeach most of Congress to be able to do it.
speaking of impeachment, is it even possible to impeach someone who's no longer the president?
No. No, it's not. But are they going to do it anyway?
Why are they even trying?
Yes.
What's the point?
Yes, they are.
The point is they're so afraid of him they want to make sure he can never run for any office again.
He didn't even do all that much when he was in office, other than talk big.
Yeah, that's about all he did. But you're right. But that's why they want to make him where he can't run for office again. They've stated that's their purpose. The thing about it is according to the U.S. Constitution, a legitimate impeachment has to be overseen by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court refused to do it. So it's being handled by a member of the House of Representatives. So he's being put on trial without a judge. And they're already taken and have publicly stated that if he doesn't come and testify, that it proves he's guilty.
It's not even a legal trial.
So he's guilty until proven innocent. No, it's not even a legal trial. They're stating he's guilty until proven innocent. That he has no right to not self-incriminate. He has to self-incriminate himself.
Which is against the Constitution again.
Against the Constitution again. They're going against all kinds of things when it comes to the U.S. Constitution. They've thrown it out. They have violated the entire U.S. Constitution and have thus broken the contract with the American people and with the states. By rights, the entire republic should be dissolved.
Yeah.
Well, Texas is the first move in that.
Did they?
For those of you who don't know, it's 2005, I think it was. There has been a movement in Texas. Well, an organization pushing for the secession of Texas. They don't call it secession, but it's secession. And it's been increasingly...
They call it Texas.
But it's been increasingly gaining steam. And they are the leader, the president of that organization. It actually has a better ring, by the way, Texit, than Brexit. Because at least Texit has half the name in it. But the president of that organization is thoroughly convinced that if they can convince the legislator to get it on the ballot, then Texas will secede from the Union.
And there seems to be a pretty good case for putting it on the ballot by 2021.
But I seriously doubt that the legislator's going to do that.
I don't know, because there's already been Texas legislatures that have put forth a bill of secession in the Texas House.
By the way, this would what they're trying to do, what this organization is trying to do, is effectively start a referendum. So what they do is they'd get the legislator to put it on so the people can vote for it and not the legislator itself. That way none of the politicians' necks are on the line. Although it seems like some of the legislators don't care if their necks are on the line.
It'll be very interesting, because if one state secedes, they'll drop like dominoes.
Trouble is getting that first state to secede.
If Texas secedes, I gotta take and look for their consulate.
It'll
I
be
become
time
a
to go
resident
back
alien. Shelley says we'll just have to take it, hook up, and move back to Texas.
Yeah.
I figured I could just take my birth certificate down to the Texas consulate and get me a passport.
Texit, though. Texit.
Of course, I guess technically that would mean that all of y'all would have dual citizenship.
Listen, you had Brexit already. You've got Italexit. You've got Polexit.
Yeah, but I thought
Catalexit
all
is
of
also
those
a
were
thing.
dumb too.
Texit actually
Well,
has a nice ring too.
The thing about it is what they're trying to do is take and follow the European example of a peaceful separation.
Mm-hmm.
This is Texas we're talking about. Peaceful separation and Texas don't usually coincide.
Oh, you did see the flag that they had flying, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
They automatically were showing the Texas flag from Gonzales,
Ah.
the Battle of Gonzales. The come and take it flag. But when we take and think about it, okay, each and every one of you has a Texas native as one parent.
Yeah.
So the way it normally works, you have share a nationality with your parents. So you all would have dual citizenship.
Yeah, but the United States doesn't recognize dual citizenship.
No, but that doesn't mean Texas will.
That's yet to be seen.
But it could get interesting.
It could get very
Of
interesting.
course, I still think Oklahoma will go with Texas if it goes, and so will Arkansas and Kansas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Florida.
Probably the Carolinas too.
Don't know about those. Possibly.
South Carolina, definitely.
Um,
North Carolina, maybe not.
Georgia probably wouldn't. I
Yeah,
don't
Georgia
expect
probably wouldn't.
Tennessee or Kentucky. Speaking about states, Ohio has got constitutional carry now on its ballot. Up before their Congress, and they just finished with a bill dealing with the Castle Doctrine. So they're becoming a pro-gun state.
Good.
Now the question is, will they take the next step and follow Texas and Missouri and Oklahoma and become sanctuary states for the Second Amendment sanctuary states?
Mm-hmm.
It was pointed out by the people who were pushing for Texas that
Can't get over that name.
Texas fought a war for its independence that started out with a battle over a tiny little cannon because the government had dared to try to take it away from them. So the attitudes towards Texas are still, you want my gun? Come and take it. Things could get interesting. But we may all have to shift to Linux phones or Apple phones.
You know, I was.
They took and
Oh, yeah, go on.
they were looking at security for phones that are into the privacy of the users, and anything that's got Google or Facebook on it, they can track everything about you.
Well, yeah. It's not really new information.
No, it's not. But their new operating system for Apple, they don't plan on allowing Facebook or Google on it unless they agreed to not gather information.
And thus the great wars,
without your consent.
the great Silicon Valley wars shall
Yeah,
begin,
without your consent.
and the war of the monopoly to stand over all others.
Well, I mean, Facebook's returned with an antitrust suit, so
Yeah, they have. They've returned with an antitrust suit. I don't see how they can get by with it though, because they're a monopoly themselves.
Yeah.
And people don't have to have an Apple phone. I don't. I have an Android phone. Now I grant you that you can de-Google your Android phone, and then they become much more secure. But that involves taking and rooting it and changing the operating system. Another thing that can be done is a Linux phone. They're the most secure of all of them.
Their biggest downside is that they're not very convenient to use. They're not very
I've never
user-friendly.
used one, so I don't know.
Oh,
Nothing Linux.
That's kind of typical for Linux.
it's very typical for Linux.
Well, technically, except your Android is a Linux phone
Technically, it's got a
if you have
Linux
an
kernel,
Android.
but it's not.
But they've proprietized it so much and Googleized it that
It's a
Holds
shoddy resemblance.
very
of
little
the
comparison.
true
Mm-hmm. The corporations are more interested in taking and controlling our government and obeying China.
Well, I'm sure they'd love to control China too. They just haven't gotten their foot in the door.
Well, China is not a free nation, so they dictate to them. If you're going to work in our country, this is what you got to do. But the thing is that they are censoring people for if they say stuff against China, not because they have to, because they choose to.
Because China's a massive market, and they would lose a fortune if they didn't.
Yeah, China's a mess.
I just don't understand a massive market of poor people or a massive market of rich people. They're choosing to cater to the massive poor people.
That's because they share ideologies.
Well, let's look at it from a slight video game perspective, right? So, I know Robert's heard of it, and I believe Dad has heard of it because we've talked about it enough times. But the video game, or the popular video game League of Legends, a brief history of it, right? Is it started as a video game? It started as one of the first of a genre of video games that was relatively untapped, and it started in America as a adaptation of a mod of a completely different game. And it continued as a standalone for a while until it was almost entirely bought out by the Chinese company Tencent because of its massive market appeal at the time. When this happened, it was primarily and almost exclusively operating in the US and in Europe. Once Tencent got a hold of it, it started spreading relatively rapidly into China and Korea. And it went from being primarily in the United States to the United States having one server that operates for everyone in North America, whether you're in Canada, the United States, or Mexico, doesn't matter. It's one server versus 5 servers in Korea, which is in South Korea specifically, 2 servers in Europe, and over 100 servers in China.
Whoa.
It is not a market of, yes, it is a market of poor people, but it is not just, you got to think of scale here.
Well, if you can get it $1 from 2 billion people, that is worth a whole lot more than $100 from a million people.
Yeah.
Except here's the thing: the U.S. that's probably lowballing the statistics here, because the U.S. pays big bucks for its products, completely disproportionately compared to China. And the US is much more of a consumer based society. We're much more willing to buy products.
Yes, but being that it's not a free society, the Chinese market can be forced to buy, if not that product, other products from that same company. Tencent's a huge company in China.
It is. It's
Absolutely
gigantic.
massive.
If you're not if you're not playing League of Legends, that doesn't matter because you're doing something else through their company.
And once again, the market that they can tap is 100 times larger than the market in the United States.
Now the
Because the lack of
TikTok,
competition.
It's actually not.
but
Well,
TikTok
yeah, you're right.
TikTok is a competitor of YouTube. How, I don't know, but it is a competitor.
It's technically a competitor of Vine.
But is it okay? But you've got these people going on there making little bitty short videos and marketing them. Well, the when they took and started to take and spread it to the United States, they found out where the real money was. It wasn't in the people making videos or the viewers. It was in the information gathered for the Chinese government from the users and that's a whole different ball of wax.
I mean, that's the primary way that Google makes money, is by
Spying.
gathering the data of its users and selling it to advertising companies. And China.
Yes, but Tencent doesn't take and sell to advertisers in China. They sell information of their users to the government. And that's the way
Yeah.
TikTok does it. They take the information of their users and they sell it to the government.
The thing is that tech companies in
they're a spy
general,
organization.
tech companies in general have always had this misimage of them, where people believed their primary funding came from advertising, which is wrong. Their primary income comes from selling their users information to whoever's willing to pay for it. And I
Which
do
is
mean
one reason why
whoever.
they're fighting Apple so much now. Because Apple says they're moving away from that. They're not going to allow it.
Mm-hmm. Or so they say. I'm skeptical, but I don't have a high opinion of Apple in the first
I
place.
am too, to a certain degree. Well, I don't fully trust Apple myself, but but security has been for a while now their bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
People spend more money for an Apple phone because they know that they're hard to get information off of. They're proprietary as all get out, a pain in the neck to do anything with, but it's hard to take and get information from them.
Mm-hmm.
Even the FBI had difficulty getting information from them. But there's an organization that should be shut down. But that's a side point. The corruption, you cannot trust what's coming out of China because they don't give you valid numbers. How many people have had COVID in China?
More than
Nobody.
they're willing to say.
We don't know. What were you saying, Robert?
I said nobody knows.
Yeah. Okay. So, we do know that it's not going to be the 3,000 that they're claiming. Especially being they're the original source.
But we also have to add that one knife victim as another coronavirus death.
No, he wouldn't qualify as a coronavirus. Well,
Yeah, he would.
if he was in the United States,
It
he would
was
qualify as a
coronavirus
coronavirus.
related.
Well, then you've got North
The man,
Korea
the
that
man
has you've got North Korea that has an almost 100% mortality rate from coronavirus.
Do they?
Yeah, because every time someone caught it, they would take them out and shoot them. Can't spread it if they're dead.
But they also had a shoot on sight order for any Chinese people headed toward the Korean border.
Now, recently they took, they've locked down enormous amounts of communities, and they're not letting anybody out. And they've got guards on there. They're just like a little prison. And whenever people get out, they'll chain them to trees or to poles or lock them up and beat them and lock them up in jail. Well, guy ran out of medication and was sick, so he took and headed down to get meds. The security guard tried to stop him. He whipped out a knife and killed him on the spot. Now the netizens have gotten it and said, "Yeah, this is just the first of it. Watch, there's fixed to be a lot of dead people."
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
And this is
pretty
from the
convinced
Chinese.
I'm pretty convinced the Chinese netizens are all talk. So
Yeah, but they're starting to snap. If a guy's willing to take and kill an authority figure with a knife, China needs to worry. Because I don't care if they're armed with sticks, they can't stop 2 billion people if they rise up against the government.
good thing China doesn't have 2 billion people. It's 1.6.
They couldn't stop 1 billion people if they're armed with sticks.
Besides, it's actually probably lower than 1.6 now because coronavirus and starvation. And
Well, there have been thousands of phone services that have discontinued and not been reinstated for various people in the China, and China requires you to have a phone.
What a phony
So
law.
those people probably aren't with us anymore. Of course, when you seal people in the cabs of their trucks, weld the door shuts on their houses. This is what you get with a socialist country. you take a lockdown, and that's where Biden wants to take our country. He's already getting paid by China anyway. He might as well act like him.
Yeah. But one
He
thing they're
stated
forgetting,
that
not even China went down without a fight before turning communist.
mhm.
In fact, millions
Well,
had to die before they turned communist.
Biden stated that the use of executive orders was a clear and present evidence of a dictator. And he's
And what's the
He's
first
done.
thing he does?
Yeah, he's done more executive orders than any other president at this point in his career.
now you're lucky you're in Italy, because apparently it's not safe to be in um, uh, Great Britain right now.
What's going on over there?
They, according to since the coronavirus lockdown, their importation of wine from Australia has increased by 19%. If their drinking has increased that much, you don't want to be anywhere near the roads.
I'll be fine. They're all driving on the wrong side of the road anyway. They'll all miss me.
Oh. But all joking aside, alcoholism in every established nation since the lockdowns began has seen an uptick. So has drug use, and so has suicide rates.
So it's domestic violence and domestic abuse.
Mhm. People were not meant to be locked up.
And they're starting to go stir crazy.
Yeah.
And
Your average
honestly,
person
I'm
can't
surprised it
handle
took this
isolation
long.
like that. I am too.
Oh, I don't think it did take this long. I think it's just been covered up. They've been talking about the increase in numbers since the lockdowns began. Just not the
Well,
mainstream sources.
I kind of wonder about the California curfews. How do you enforce a curfew when almost a third of your population's homeless?
That's how.
Kick them out.
So how do you enforce a curfew when almost a third of your population's homeless?
Round them
Mustard
up.
gas.
Mine wasn't
What were
what I was
you,
about to say. Wasn't going to be much more optimistic. I was going to say you round them up and you put them in cams.
well, up in Quebec, they declared that their curfew was unconstitutional when concerning homeless people, because they were enforcing the curfew on homeless people who couldn't go home because they didn't have a home to go to.
Somebody actually died because of it.
Mm-hmm. They now have lost on their curfew because their curfew limits 10 people per building. And
They have more people than they have buildings, don't they?
probably. But the Jews, a group of Jews took and sued, stating that didn't take into consideration the size of the building. If people, there's no reasonable reason to limit 10 people to a building that is large, it is large enough to social distance for a much larger group of people. They really had a very valid point.
Mm-hmm.
So what the court stated is that no, you can't limit just 10 people if there's more than one entrance. Tell me, how many public buildings have only one entrance?
None of them. Basic fire codes.
Mm-hmm. But see, they didn't enforce that 10-person limit to the stores like Walmart, um, IGA, that type place.
As if
They
the
did enforce
virus
it on the
just went
churches.
away when it was not convenient for them.
Yeah. But they enforced it on the churches and the synagogues. So we would be still locked down if we had that kind of restriction because we have too many people and we're a small church. We have by far more people watching online than we have attending.
I was wondering when this podcast would swing back around to theology, considering it was actually originated in because of it.
Well, guess what? We pulled her back in.
It only took 31 episodes.
No, we've had a few that we touched on theology.
Yeah, there's been a few.
But
about 10%, maybe.
and you take, okay, what they're asking people to do with these lockdown orders is go directly against their religion. Christianity says, forsake not the assembling of yourself together. So if we're not to forsake the assembling ourselves together, yet the government is saying you shall not assemble unless you have fewer than 10 people, or unless you have, like around here, or I think it's 25 as a limit in Arkansas and 50 in Oklahoma. And I don't know about some of the other states, but 10 in California. How that is a direct violation of the Second Amendment. I know that
A Second Amendment? Don't you mean First Amendment?
you can.
He means First Amendment.
You're right. First Amendment. Yeah, I meant First Amendment. It's a direct violation of the First Amendment. So I know that Canada doesn't have that in their constitution, amendments like that in their constitution, but they do have something similar to it. but they are directly discriminating against believers. And I believe the reason they're doing so is that socialists cannot have a strong religious society because they turn to God rather than to the state.
What they don't realize is that Christianity thrives under pressure.
Yes, Christianity thrives under pressure. So as you're pressing down on the Christians, telling them they can't, they become rebellious and do it anyway. And the rebels in the society join them. Now, I grant you, you've got some um, um, Christians out there that, oh, the Bible says that you're to take and obey those that have authority over you. So God placed them in command over you, so you have to obey their restrictions. They say not to go to church, so to obey God, you cannot not obey them.
So what do you do when when their commands contradict the Bible? You have to obey them. So they tell me to shoot Josh in the head. I've got to shoot him in the head, right?
And according to their argument, yes. I say that it's hogwash because the Bible isn't talking about obeying governmental authorities. Because the Christians were illegal when it was written. They were all criminals. If they had have meant obeying the government, they would have had to quit being Christians and Jews. Then
No, Judaism was legal.
only if they make the annual sacrifice to the emperor.
No, they tolerated them without it until
Tolerate
Titus.
and it being technically legal are not the same thing.
They just didn't enforce it with them. That's one of the things after the rebellion they took and started enforcing the law.
Well, Titus said that when he destroyed the temple that he wanted to wipe out both Christianity and Judaism.
Right. So here they're using one scripture taken out of context and said, okay, we have to obey those that have authority over us. Therefore, we cannot disobey the law. And yet the law at the time in which that scripture was written said that Christians were illegal and they were breaking the law. That can't be what that scripture is talking about. So if it's not talking about governments and it's talking to Christians about Christians, it has to be Christian authority. It cannot be secular authority.
And the question then becomes, how do you know that it's Christian authority? Well, frankly, if it doesn't contradict anything in the Bible. Because the moment it does, it's no longer a Christian authority, and therefore no longer worth anything. Right.
It's just like these preachers that teach that well, if you've got a beard, you're committing a sin. Or those that take and say, well,
if you don't have a beard, then you're committing a sin.
You can't be part of this church if you don't have a beard. Yeah. The New Testament, I grant you, the Old Testament says not to cut shave the corners of your beard.
That still requires context too. That's not.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You're right. It does. But the New Testament doesn't say anything about it at all.
Frankly, I'm not entirely sure what "don't shave the corners of your beard" means.
I've studied it and I don't know what it means. It's like not cutting the corners of your head. What? What are the? My head's not square.
As far as historians can tell, it refers to the pagan practice of marring your facial hair and the hair on your head in mourning.
Yes, that's what I understood it as too. It's basically you go into mourning, so you cut patches of hair off, so you look like a punk rocker.
So the idea
Hmm.
was to separate the Jewish people from the pagans. That's
Yes, basically that was it. Don't be like the pagans. Well, the New Testament does say that we're not supposed to be carrying on and acting like the world. We're supposed to be
yeah,
different
but
from the world.
it's a little less specific.
Yes, it's less specific, but it still comes down to we're not supposed to be like the rest of the world. The rest of the world does certain things, certain ways that the Bible doesn't condone. We're not supposed to follow those ways. Um, they're going through and they're taking and justifying sexual immorality. They go through and they take and justify corruption. They justify lying, etc. We're not supposed to be like them. You, you did say that that we were supposed that it would take that we're getting back to the theology.
Yeah. I suppose we needed a slow news day.
Well, see, here's one of the interesting things. The reason that
Now,
this show is called The Trumpet of the Last Few Days was to make fun of those people who are constantly looking at the news cycle and saying, look, this is like this thing from Revelation.
This is the sign that it's the last days. It's the trumpet of the last
and it is
days.
the last days. Don't get me wrong. I firmly believe we are in the last days,
But not in the way that they say.
but not in the way they say. I believe Christ could come back at any time.
But because of that,
But if he comes back,
it's not as easy for us to tie everything into religion like they do.
that's true. Because I firmly believe that everything in Revelations, except for the second coming of Jesus Christ, has been fulfilled.
But we're not going to be pointing to Revelations say, look, oh, see, there's a famine over in, I don't know, Cambodia. There's a wildfire in Australia, and there's a locust swarm in China. The world's going to end.
Well, on that same line of thought, we're dealing with current events as basically our primary topic that we cover. Current events in politics. Well, what do current events in politics usually pertain to? Actions that somebody has done. So, somebody, meaning people, the vast majority of people in the world are not Christians and do things without any thought of Christianity. So, therefore, our analysis of them cannot take Christianity into effect in regards to their motivation for their actions. So, for the vast majority of the part, that leaves us with a very secular analysis of what's going on.
Well, except that we can take Christianity into account. It's just people would get really irritated with us constantly saying, and here is another display of the evil of mankind.
Yeah.
now, okay. We have a president, the great pretender, and the Speaker of the House, both of which are professed Catholics, both of which attend Catholic Mass. both of which support abortion, which the Catholic Church and the Bible condemns. So we can take and discuss this theology and the actions of the people around. They talked about Biden going to mass just last Sunday, and yet he promotes things that the Catholic Church historically has always stood against.
Well, and what we're dealing with
And
is a large number of secularists, some of which claim to be Christians, some of which definitely don't claim to be Christians, most of which definitely don't claim to be Christians. And so everything they do is going to be from that secular point of view.
well, it's like I was listening to some commentators last night, and they were going through taking and spewing profanity like mad. And one of them stopped and said, "Wait a second, you have to consider our evangelical audience." And then they said that they were Christians as well. Well, I believe the fact that they were once Marines. Christian, I think they need to get saved. If not, they are some very poorly informed Christians and babes in Christ that know nothing about where the Bible says, "Let no filthy communication proceed out of thy mouth." But what they had to say when extracting the profanity was accurate. They were talking about two police officers taking and pepper spraying a 9-year-old little girl to get her into the back of a police car.
Which, frankly speaking, if you need to pepper spray a 9-year-old little girl to get her in the back of a police car, you should just quit your job. You're in the wrong field. It's
Yeah.
Unless that 9-year-old little girl is also a bodybuilder.
Now, I grant you that I couldn't tell because of the mosaic they put over the heads of minors. All I could see was a coat, pants, and them shoving the person, trying to get the person to quit screaming and get in the car. I couldn't have told you anything about that particular person. If they hadn't have told me it was a 9-year-old, I wouldn't have known it was a 9-year-old. If they had, but it was a lot smaller than they were. And personally speaking, if I couldn't put a 9-year-old in the back of a seat of a car as a police officer, I'd be seriously questioning my choice of profession.
Perhaps you should become a social worker instead. I hear it's all the
Yeah.
rage. They're replacing police anyway.
And the thing about it is
there's a YouTuber
it was
that
the parents that called the police on the little girl.
There's a YouTuber that I occasionally watch that occasionally has this this bit that they go on where they joke about how they could beat up any 9-year-old in the world. The strongest 9-year-old in existence, but they could beat them up. Yeah, it's a running gag, but I can't help but think about it in discussions like this.
You know, I have done some substitute teaching, and kids normally act their worst with substitute teachers. And I haven't had any trouble getting them to cooperate. Why would a guy with a badge and a gun have difficulty getting a kid to obey? Uh, thing about it, it speaks to our times, the way people do things nowadays. They took and take God out of the schools. They take and go through and say, okay, you can't discipline the children. Even the guy who came up with that said that he ruined a couple of generations. The Oh, you can't take and speak harshly to them because you'll hurt their self-esteem. I can assure you these kids have enough self-esteem for any 10 people. They don't need to have to worry about having their self-esteem hurt. The they can't control their kids. They have to call the cops. What kind of society are we living in?
I can
And there'll
tell
probably end up being
you
riots because from what I've been.
I can tell you that in my job, there have been more than a few people that I have encountered that I have looked at, and my immediate thought was they were not bullied enough as a child.
Oh.
And I take it you don't just mean they weren't spanked enough.
No. I mean bullied. I mean
Like their
taken
face
out
rubbed into
behind the
theirs.
school by their peers and beaten up. And left to hang by their underwear on a coat
Okay.
rack. I mean bullied.
Well, you never had that happen to you.
That it never
That
happened to
doesn't mean he
me,
doesn't think it should.
but there are a lot of people I have met that the first thought I had when I met them was, this person was not bullied enough as a child. I am pretty certain.
Now, I halfway expect.
I'm pretty certain that a couple of those people would be taking consistent showers if they were bullied consistently as a child.
Yeah, they probably would be. I halfway expect riots because of this little girl.
Yeah, that's
Wait,
pretty likely.
wait.
I couldn't
What
tell.
color was her skin?
Couldn't tell. Mosaic,
Black.
remember?
I couldn't tell. They say she was black.
Okay, then yes, there will be riots. If she was white, nothing would happen.
They say she was a black girl. I have to go with what they say because the mosaic made it where I couldn't identify what race she was. But and the police officers were both white.
No, yep, riots. This is the world we live in. It's where things have gone.
The sad thing is that the parents are the ones who called the cops on the girl.
Yeah.
Should have just gotten a switch.
Would have been better for everyone if they had just gotten a switch.
And saved a lot of damage, a lot of heartache.
And frankly, this whole circumstance was embarrassing for everyone involved.
Yes, it was. But the police department was ridiculed.
As they should have been.
The parents, of course, are being ridiculed.
As they should have been.
Yeah. And the little girl was being ridiculed. I still
As
can't
she
get
should
over,
have been.
or one of the police officers says, "You're acting just like a child,"
Yeah,
and her
duh.
comment back was, "I am a child." That was just clear as day through the audio. And I was thinking, yeah, I would have said the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to denounce her for having a tongue in her.
I mean, yeah. That is the correct response.
That was the most appropriate response possible. And the whole time she's screaming for her parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane how our society's become.
Well, if you think our society is running off the rails too, feel free to give us some more examples down in the comments below. I'm sure we've missed a lot of them. Otherwise, feel free to hit the like, subscribe button, and share this video with your friends and your enemies, either one or both. We don't care.
What you're saying is that we're running off the rails on a crazy train?
Very possibly.
Isn't that a song?
It is, yeah.
From a band that's most definitely not Christian.
But it's a catchy song.
I've lost track. Anyway, see you next time.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Ruining the outro segments one at a time.